Okay. Like I say, I'll hand over to Alex and then kind of let him go through the updates. Over to you, Al.
Thanks, Tom. Evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the which is now the second Return to Play webinar, and I'm sure it won't be the last. I've got the PowerPoint on the screen, which is mainly for my reference and Faye when she speaks later. Everything on the slides will be spoken. So yeah, as we go through, I'll move the slides, but everything will be read out. First of all, last week, I think it was Tuesday, when the government announced the rule of 6 and then the impact on this on indoor team sports. The current rules are non-disabled people aged 18 and over will need to adhere to the rule of 6 if they're playing team sports indoors. This means playing in a group of no more than 6 people. Initially, that was really bad news when we first heard that. But then as you read on in most of the guidance, there is a disability sport exemption. And that has been positioned as indoor team sports involving disabled adults aged 18 and over, played formally and under government approved, which is our Goalball UK guidance, including groups of six or more following social distancing. So when you read that, it's actually is a positive message. And as we go through the Goalball UK changes, not much has actually changed in terms of our guidance on the number of people allowed in sessions. One of our key talking points with Sport England and DCMS last week was why is it not okay for non-disabled people to be like enforcement of groups of 6, and then why is it okay for disabled people to be in more than 6 people in groups? And they didn't really have that clear an answer, other than they didn't want to restrict disabled people's access to sport and physical activity. So from this, we have, as Goalball UK, developed and updated our guidelines around population of people in your sessions. In the main guidance document, this is section 7.3. The maximum number of playing participants is 12, and this is applicable to all ages in affiliated club and Goalball UK sessions. That number hasn't changed from the original guidance that we issued. It was back in August now. That number hasn't changed. What has changed is now that in the sessions, it's essential that participants are split into bubbles of no more than 6 people. So we're applying the rule of 6 within the maximum number of playing participants of 12. These bubbles must not mix or come into contact in person during the session. So for clarity, Bubble A and Bubble B can play against each other in a game of goalball, but they can't meet in the middle of the court and socialise after you finished your game, for example. So need to keep the bubbles separate when in the hall. Educational settings may operate in agreed numbers and bubbles as set out by the individual institution for physical education or recreational activity. The main thinking behind this is that in schools, each school is putting into place their own bubble systems. So to make schools and colleges and universities' lives easier, if they've got a bubble they're already delivering sport or physical activity in, then they can stay in that bubble in line with their own institutions' kind of policies and risk assessments. One of the other key elements to the rule of 6 is support personnel, so coaches, medical people, guardians, carers, parents, personal assistants. They don't count towards the playing participant number, but they must be restricted to a maximum of 1 per participant. So the message is, run your sessions with the minimal number of people in the hall. Avoid unnecessarily people being in the hall. Every time you add a new person and you add more people, you're effectively adding another layer of contact, another layer of risk, and then potentially another layer of impact if people from your session need to go into isolation. What their social and family lives are outside of the sessions, 2 weeks in isolation can have a big impact. So just think about, yes, you're allowed 12 if you've got 12 playing participants, but do all 12 of those people need to be there? So that's up to you as a club and us as Goalball UK to manage when we kind of do registers and have people registering for sessions. In terms of the space you're using, it's still really important to have enough space to maintain social distancing at all times off court and to keep the bubbles apart and separate. So if you're playing in smaller spaces, please really think about how you're going to run the session and how actually the maximum number of playing people may only be 8 or it may be 6, depending on the space, but the maximum is 12. We feel these guidelines don't take the exemption too far for disability sport, but still allow us and clubs to deliver meaningful activity to keep the sport going, and also allow people to still enjoy goalball and continue plans to return to play. Not all clubs are there yet. So this still does allow you to carry on your planning or even start your planning from now. So that is really, I hope that's straightforward. If you do have questions, there will be time at the end. But as I said, the maximum number of people in a session, playing participants, is still 12. The key difference is you now need to split your group into bubbles of no more than 6 people. I'm now going to hand you over to Faye Dale, who's the Great Britain men's head coach. Faye delivered the first Goalball UK activity back, which was a men's training camp last weekend. So over to you, Faye.
Thanks, Alex. Really great that we've got this many people on this webinar, and anyone that is hoping for some magic words from me, you're probably not going to get them. But what you will get is a bit of an overview of how we managed a 2-day training camp. We did have, in effect, 5 members of staff, and I'm conscious that what I'm going to feed back to you guys today, you might be thinking we don't have that many people to be able to do this. What I would encourage you to do is think about people within your clubs that you trust, whether that's a parent, a guardian, a friend that is coming along with someone, and if you trust them to act appropriately and safely, they could be a really good pair of hands for you, especially if they've got some vision as well to be able to do some of these bits that I'm going to talk you through now. So it'll come as no surprise that sanitizing is number 1 on my list. It's so important in everyday life, wherever we're going at the minute. But when you're sanitizing, the key for me is the speed that it can be done at. We at first asked all of our players to bring their own sanitizer. We did have some some there anyway, but in their own little areas, you've got your sanitizer, just go back to your stations and be able to get it. But what we found is that if we do that, when people touch their eye shades, they're then contaminating potentially their eye shades, going back, putting sanitizer on, and then coming back into the playing area. So what we decided to do was have multiple sanitizers around the court, whether they're a couple behind the goals, some at halfway lines, some at maybe the high ball lines, depending on how many referees and coaches you've got. And the idea with this is that the sanitizer is really no more than 2 or 3 meters away, so that you don't have to, if you're talking to a player, go running over to a sanitizing station, which is at halfway, but on the other side of court, and then you've got to go all the way running back, because the speed of the session and utilising them 30 minutes is really key. I did have sanitizer in my pocket, and I thought, I'll be able to just hand that out when I need to. But by the time you take it out of your pocket, undo the clip, squirt it, put it back on, put it in your pocket, then you're going to do that again. It is easier to just have the little spray, the little pump-ons that you can just pump out. In terms of the speed for the players, every time that we'd stopped the game or the drill or we'd done a substitution, we asked players when they heard that whistle game or whistle half time or whatever, that they would just stand up wherever they are, put their hands out, arm's width, and then someone would come round that's sighted or could see where the hands are and just spray a bit of the, put some sanitizer on the hands. So straight away, you are limiting them touching anything else, whether it's the shades or having to find their way back to their orientation to where their equipment is. So yeah, that worked really well once the GB men got the hang of not just ripping the shades off straight away, which is what they would usually do within a training session. So yeah, definitely have people, or whether it's yourself as the coach or the lead, have sanitizer ready and ask your players, stand up, hands out, be patient, because if you do have to go around all 6 players, then that does take a little bit of time. And then once that's happened, they can start moving around or do whatever they need to do. But that did massively take a lot of the pressure off, making sure that everyone sanitised their hands enough and consistently as well. This one was, well, it could be interesting for you as a club, depending on what level of vision that the people running it have got. But I had 2 sets of goal balls. So I had set number 1 and I had set number 2. And I just used a Sharpie and wrote 1 at the 2 circles at each end of the ball on the first set. And then I wrote 2 on the second set. So when I'd put a set into the cleaning area, I knew that that was all set number 1. And then used set number 2 for the rest of the session. And then when it was time to clean set number 2, I'd bring set number 1 out, and that worked really well. If you only need 1 of the 6 balls in that, then you don't have to clean all 6. If they're clean, as long as they've not been used, and then you can just rotate them around. But finding a way that suits you. We needed 6 because of the level and the amount of players that we had within the session, because we in effect had 2 bubbles of 4. So we used 4 balls for, say, a warm-up, and then we used the other 2 for when we went into match play, and then rotated them all with the set number 2. If you can't see the number, it's really important that you allocate an area for cleaning, and whether you put a bench to make sure that any balls that go off court hit the bench and then come back, and then the set number 2 balls are on the other side of the bench, so that you are having a clear distinction between the balls that are in play for that 30 minutes and the balls that are clean and ready to go. If you just put them in a corner and a player shoots them out and that ball contacts the other set, the number 2, then you're going to have to clean them all again, because you don't know what risk that there is there. So yeah, have an area that's cornered off would be a big suggestion. In terms of the sanitizing as well, and my kind of the last point is you can get big rolls of like blue and white like tissue. We had 4 of these positioned behind each corner of the goals. And what we did is any player that was sweating quite a lot, or we knew would very soon be sweating quite a lot, I would sanitize my hands, pick up the roll, get some of the roll, give it to the player. Obviously hands out, hands distance again. So we're trying to keep that social distancing. They would clean the shades or do what they need to do, and then pop it straight into a bin. So that no one has to touch it, barring the person that is there. So that works quite well. So if you know that some of your players will be sweating, then think about everything that is really accessible really quickly. Otherwise, people will be stood around waiting for people to clean up and get ready. Al's discussed the bubbles, so bubble A and bubble B. Because we were there for 2 days, we'd behind each goal, we'd allocated each player a 2-metre area that was marked off with a tactile line. At a club session, you might not be able to do that, But what I would definitely suggest is, as someone walks in, you allocate them bubble A or bubble B, and their area is behind a certain goal. Whatever goal they're behind, that is the goal that bubble plays in for the duration of your session, so that you're limiting the orientation and where they need to go. It also just kind of helps them to know that there's no pressure to be wandering around and finding where they need to go and hitting other people. It also means that they can work with the bubbles that they've got. So if someone knows that someone might have a bit more useful vision, and little Johnny doesn't have great useful vision, they can help each other back to their area, trying to do that verbally over any guiding, trying to keep that social distance is the key, really. If you allocate them areas, get them to put their kit there, their bags, their water bottles. We positioned them behind the goal purely because we wanted to limit the amount of balls that would be hitting their areas. It depends on your club and how much space that you've got to do that. If they are at the sides, obviously you've just got to try and minimise the amount of balls that are going to be hitting where their stuff is. When they've gone to their bubble area, and then you want to bring them back into court, it might be that as a coach you're going to explain the next bit of the game, or you're going to say to each bubble who's going to be on court or whatever. We got our guys to line up on the high ball line. If they line up on the high ball line, they've got a tactile reference, and then they can verbally talk to each other about how far they are away from each other. And it's a line that everyone knows as well. So that worked really well, because they would just come straight into that, and then the coach stands at the sides on the halfway line, and then they can talk without having to raise their voice too much. That worked pretty well for us, and then I felt really confident as a coach that I don't have to worry about people wandering around because they've got their tactile marker. Because some players do go on a bit of a wander. Yeah, so that's that bit, and then the final bit really is the 30-minute playing window. It's really important that you maximise this as much as possible, especially because I know a lot of clubs might only have, say, an hour and a half session. So just being clever with how you use your space and how you kind of allocate different areas of the court. So for me, that 30-minute window has to complement your session plan. So get someone to time your 30 minutes. Someone hopefully that is external to whoever's coaching, because it's quite hard to coach everything that you need to do and to keep a track of that 30 minutes as well. So we had our physio tracking that, and it means that the physio or whoever can say to you, you've got 10 minutes left, or you've got 5 minutes left, or in my case, Faye, you need to stop now because you're going to go over time. So yeah, try and get someone that can really keep on the ball with that. For me, the time starts really when the activity involves the players being on the floor. So for us, we did our warm up in the neutral area. So the area in the middle of court between the two high ball lines. Players could be on the floor, they've still got a tactile reference, and we made sure that they just stayed in that area. On their side of the court as well, there's still enough space for 4 or for 6 people, and to social distance within there as well. If you're doing a throw-in warm-up, if you use the goals and they don't touch the floor, for me, that playing area in the team areas is absolutely fine. But what you need to do is clean the goals before you start a game. If the goals are clean, they haven't been on the floor in them team areas, and I'm talking kind of up to the 6 metre line, the high ball line here, you can start your half an hour. If you have enough room and you can do the warm up off court, that means like the stretching and the dynamic side of it. And then even the throwing off court as well. you will then have the whole court to be able to start your 30 minutes of play. In the 30 minutes, it's a little bit on, well, we worked it on both ways. Firstly, we did 30 minutes from the second that people start rolling around on the floor and playing in effect a proper game. And whenever the 30 minutes stops, then that's it. And then we found that the players were wanting a drink because some players were just not used to obviously playing goalball because they've not done it for a long time. So if we stopped for a drink or say half time or between a game, we would do the sanitizing. They could go back to their station, get their waters and have a drink because it's really important that we don't mix the water bottles. From the second that we stopped that game, that's when the 30-second timer stopped. They would go back to their areas, do what they needed to do, and then when they came back and we started, that's when the 30 minutes started again. So as long as you're on it and you make sure that your timing, then for me that 30 minutes can be used really, really smartly. Otherwise, you end up cleaning lots, and if you're a coach, it's really hard to do enough coaching to make your players better or your teams better, and limit that kind of stop starting, which does still happen, because you want to be able to give feedback to people. The final bit on that as well is, if you've got a hole big enough, just try and do the warm-ups off court, because that will maximise your court time and your minimal cleaning. If you use off court for any warm-ups and stuff, you still need to clean it. All right, put some different tactile markers down as well if people need that, and it will make your session go quicker. If you've got people, again, like I said at the start, that you can trust to do the cleaning and stuff, then that really would go in your favour, especially if you're a club that has maybe one coach, because it is hard work. But I guess the positives for the GB men and for Goalball UK is that it does work. You can still play goalball. You can play it really safely, but you've got to be really clever and really smart in what you're doing. So yeah, I think without going on too much, that's the kind of the big bits for me. So I'll pass you back over to Alex.
Thanks, Faye. Really, really good, insightful stuff for hopefully the clubs to take on board for when to take into training or when they start back. We're now going to go to the questions from the chat and the audience. So Tom and Steve, if you want to, pick me or Faye based on the kind of line of inquiry.
Yeah, we've not had any questions into the chat box.
I might have done it wrong. I sent it to Alex.
Go on,
I've never done it before. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Alex, have you got one?
Have you got two questions there, Alex? I can send them again.
Yeah, so I've got it. So is the maximum 30 still applicable? No. This is now it's the 12 or the 10 plus 1. So if you've got 10 participants, you can have maximum of 10 support personnel. If you've got 8 participants, you can have a maximum of 8. We're really trying to keep the numbers down. That's where the risk is. So that is as I said, that is a slight change in terms of how we've worked to support personnel. If you think it's going to be an issue for your club in that you've got 12 participants and 12 support personnel isn't going to be enough, please get in touch and we can put some kind of like individual club guidelines and risk assessments in place. But I would implore you that the people in your session need to be the people that are either coaching, refereeing, cleaning, or kind of medical personnel. People sat around on the side is not great.
Can we ask the parent to leave? Because if you take our novice section, for example, we think they'll have the 12 players, and they're all young. Each will come with a parent.
Yep.
And it doesn't leave any room for volunteers.
Yeah, I mean, I would ask if you can, if parents can leave, or if if that is a case where everyone is a junior, then we can look at the number of coaches. But I still would encourage that those parents like go up to the balcony or go out of the hall if you're talking about Peter Simmons, because if you add 12 adults in the hall, you're adding basically 12 people. I appreciate obviously if they're parents and carers and they want to be there, have a right to be there. So we'd need to look at the numbers in that.
We might come back to you on that one, Alex.
Yeah, and then the can 6 players in Bubble A, for example, also play each other after an end has been sanitised? Yes, but just make sure I make sure it is sanitised, and then once that bubble's come off, you'll then need to sanitise it before the Bubble B come onto that end. Go into what Faye said about planning sessions. I would avoid that initially, just to make your life
easier.
Make your life easier.
Yeah.
Alex, we just had another one from Sarah around guidance on non-players wearing masks.
Yep. So currently the advice in our guidance still is that in writing is that if they're maintaining social distance from everyone, then they don't need to wear a mask. However, that is under review based on at the moment in pretty much every other place in society. If you're indoors, you need to be wearing a mask. So that is on the that is going around at the moment for discussion.
Excellent.
Those plastic visors, am I right in saying that they're now discouraged? Because we were hoping to use those, but I've heard that
from a medical point of view, they're absolutely useless unless you're wearing a mask as well.
Okay.
Sorry, before anybody, Goalball has a different opinion.
No worries. Yeah, that's it for the questions. Unless people have got any burning questions, please obviously fire away at the minute. Jamie, it looks like you're trying to say something. Go on.
I'm as bad as Bridget. I can't find the thing to send the message.
Don't worry.
This is to go to Faye. What did you mean by what do you mean by the 30-minute playing window?
So basically, in our return to play guidance, there's 30 minutes until you need to sanitize, as in the court.
Right.
So in terms of the window, you've got the golden 30 minutes to make sure you can get as much goalball in as possible, and it's how you use that and be smart. As soon as that 30 minutes has stopped, everyone needs to be off court, and you need to basically sanitize the whole thing.
How long does that?
The team area.
How long does that take?
Well, it depends what equipment you've got as well. We were averaging probably 5 to 6 minutes, but we practiced it a lot over the 2 days. We are looking at other options of how to get the solution onto the court quicker, because we were using spray bottles. There is some other ways, but Alex will update when he's got a better idea. We're just speaking to some suppliers. And then it's obviously drying time as well. And what I'd say that each floor is different. So we were on the rubber kind of Deraflex floor. So that was drying reasonably quick on day one, especially because the temperature in the room was hotter. As soon as the aircon came on day 2, it took longer. So the main thing for me is that it has to be safe. So as soon as it's dry, then it's fine. But just make sure that the floor is as dry as possible. Especially.
Did you just spray then? Did you not mop as well? How did you do it? Sorry to ask the basic question.
So the solution that we used was really fast drying. So we then went over it with a mop, with a microfiber, just to make sure that we got it all up. If you want to, with the solution we use, you could have left it for another 4 or 5 minutes and it would have been completely dry.
And the microfiber head, is that then got to be disposed of or put in the washing machine at the end of the session, or can you use it again because it's been in contact with the solution, so in theory it could be clean?
Yeah, so we used the same one, and then we changed them when they were too wet, not, but they were. So we we were testing it quite a lot, to be honest, but we found that over using like paper towels and stuff, that was faster. And for us, because we were using the 70% solution, that once that was on the mop, it was clean anyway. But we did change them regularly, just for our own peace of mind, and we changed them obviously on a new day of training. If you wanted to, you could change it when you have another session coming in, just so that you know that it's not being there's no bubble kind of contamination there. And then I wash them at home on 60 degrees, so they're ready for the next one. They're really good because you can reuse them, and as long as you've got enough of them, they were great.
Faye, can I just jump in? We've just got a couple of questions. Sorry. So Matt, I'll come back to you, but Tracy, you'll just raise your hand. So
it was.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, it was. So you said about this is really to Faye, I suppose, or even Alex. The mopping up the sweat from the not so much from the floor, from the player's face and all that. Would a flannel, a personal flannel that is attached to the player? So I normally when I'm training, not so much when I'm actually playing in a tournament, but I normally have a small flannel that's tucked into my waistband and my shorts, and whenever I get hot, I just I'm mopping my sweat with my own personal flannel, and then obviously that's kept with me. Is that okay, as long as obviously at the end of play I'm then putting that in my own personal bag and taking it with me?
I would say no. Don't bring anything that's going to have your personal kind of sweat on it. For me, it's much better that you use the blue roll. It goes straight into a bin, and then it's not falling on the floor. It's not dragging on the floor. Especially if you have it down your trousers and you dive, then it hits the floor. You're just asking for a whole host of problems.
Right. Okay. It was just that with the green, obviously somebody would have to get the bin to bring round, so otherwise you're not.
So what we did on that is basically got a cardboard box and some really thick, really big bin liners that kind of went in the box but went outside of it as well. So I've got a couple of really sweaty players. I think we all probably know who I'm on about. So we had two boxes and they were positioned on the right wing, ready for this particular player. So what I wanted to avoid is having to touch their sweat. So basically, if at any point we thought that they were sweating too much, I'd sanitize my hands, get the blue roll, take some off, basically put it in, sanitize their hands, put it in there, put the blue roll in their hands. They would do what they need to do, and then I'd kick this cardboard box around just to the side of the goal, not on court, and just be like, here's your orientation on the post. There's the bin. So they don't go running off all over the place, because otherwise, if they're sweating and it's dripping all over, that's not what you want either. We just looked at ways to minimise the time that we have to stop the game for people to go and sort the sweat out. And minimise any risk to me or a member of staff that is then going to touch it, because we didn't want to touch it.
Okay, thanks, Faye.
Cheers, Tracy. Just another one. It may be for Faye, this actually from Matt. What was the most effective way to sanitize the court? I think obviously we just kind of spoke about it there.
The 70% alcohol spray. Like I said, we are looking at finding the best one. The one we used was pretty good, but it was only in 50 ml bottles. And when you're doing a big area, it takes quite a lot of time. Where if you've got it in a bigger bulk, it would work. But bear with us on that one, and we will give you some more.
Did you apply that with sprayers, and did you use the same thing for the goal?
Sorry, say that again.
An awful lot of water in it. I didn't want to over waterlog it.
He said basically, Faye, around if you've got when you sanitize the court, do you use the spray to sanitize the court and the goals?
No, sorry, we used the spray for the court and then we had wipes for the goals because that was just easier to go around it with wipes as well. And that's where the bins at the side of the court came in really well, because we could then just put it straight into the bins, and we'd obviously regularly change them bins as well.
Cool. Excellent. And then kind of what kind of is why do we have obviously the 30-minute break? Why not longer?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Right,
we're treating the floor as a piece of equipment, and the current advice from government is to clean shared equipment every 30 minutes. So it's actually every 20 to 30 minutes. So we've extended that to 30. The players are sharing the floor, so that is why it's 30 minutes. We're treating the floor as a piece of equipment. I would love to make it an hour to make the running of a session easier, but that is the current guidance. So that's why that is the window of 30 minutes.
No,
can I just add into that as well? If you want to play goalball like we know goalball, and you've got players that want to switch positions, that 30 minutes and the amount of sanitizing you do means that you can still play a good level of goalball and can change positions if you want to do that. If it went to an hour and you weren't doing as much sanitizing, I'd question then actually like how clean and how safe is it as well. So that's why sanitizing is incredibly important. You can't do enough of it. And at the minute, I think 30 minutes is a really good time to make sure that we're all nice and safe and we can play goalball to as much of the level of what we know goalball to be. Then that's the way forward at the minute.
Just linking back to the point we've just made, Russ, I haven't forgot about your point. We'll come back to it. But how about using the disposable wipes? So obviously for the goals that's fine, but obviously around the floor, is there any alternatives? But I think obviously we've covered that under what we've just said around that.
Yeah, I'd just say with the wipes, make sure you test them. We did test using wipes. We found two issues. One, they leave like a bit of a slime on the court that can make it slippy. So it does really depend on which wipes you're using. I appreciate that. So test them. Also, if you're going to wipe it, then you need to get on your hands and knees, which mean unless you attach the wipe to a mop, but then you need to find a wipe that is big enough to fit the mop. If you go onto your hands and knees, you're probably going to go through a fair amount of cleaning bodies because they're going to be on the floor for a long time, and it's not. So I'd look to find a mop solution to clean the floor. In terms of, as Faye said, we are trialing and erroring a number of solutions, and when we think we've got the best one, we will let you know. But currently, the spray that we advise in the guidance is the spray that we used at the GB camp, and it does work.
Okay,
does work. Yeah.
That's good.
Just on top of that, Alex, can players within the same bubble guide each other, basically three in a plus one to all with cleaning, etc.?
When you say the same bubble, do you mean in the same household bubble or the session bubbles?
I'd imagine it'd be this. It'd be the same bubble as in the 6 players.
I would recommend that those players should try and socially distance when they're off court. So I wouldn't recommend them tactile guiding. We're limiting the interactions within the 2 meter social distancing to the on court. So if players are off court, then they need to kind of orientate themselves or with voice guiding, and then minimize the amount of time the players are in contact with each other.
Brilliant. And then we just had another one here, but I think this falls back into the ones that we've just been speaking about, but around the mops that you can buy and spray the solution on and then mop it overwards. They're options as well.
Yeah, definitely. As long as the solution going in is suitable to clean the floor, we tried a from Tesco supermarket kind of floor cleaner, and it just makes the court like an ice rink for like 15-20 minutes. So
all good supermarkets are available.
Yeah, as always, yeah. Unless Tesco want to sponsor us. But yeah, just test whatever you're going to use. As I said, we will try and provide the best solution. But if you think you know better or you want to find something better, then please do it. But please test it first, because it's really important for safety that players aren't taking a run up, planting their left or right leg, and then landing on the floor. So just test whatever you're going to use.
Excellent.
It's just the team area, isn't it, Alex?
Yes.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, you will know your players and your teams really well. So for us, because balls were going loose and people were diving onto the area after the high ball line sometimes. We cleaned where we felt we needed to clean. So if no one's gone on a certain area, then we won't clean it. And obviously team area would always be cleaned regardless. But if you've got a junior team that are never going to move off their orientation points in the team area, absolutely fine. If you've got a really dynamic team that are moving into different areas, then you might have to clean the other area as well.
I think that's about it. I don't think, if we've not got no more questions, then we can bring it to a halt. I know, apologies, it's 15 minutes late, but I think we've got some really good stuff there. And obviously this will be being recorded so that we can obviously send it out afterwards, so that if people weren't available, then obviously they can still listen in. What I would say is just a big thanks to Alex and Faye just for the time this evening. Obviously, if you do have any further questions, please contact the COVID email, not myself, covid@goalballuk.com, and then we can answer your questions, obviously to the best of his knowledge. But yeah, like I say, big thanks to everyone for coming tonight.